Hello, welcome to Dissident Canada. My name is Tyler, and I'm gonna look at the housing market. Yes, yet again. Done it a few times before because it keeps coming up, and people keep being wrong on the problem. Specifically, here in Canada, the blame is immigration. Does immigration, and specifically mass immigration, play a part? Yes, it does play a part. But if all things were created equal in the entire system of Canada, wouldn't have been a problem. Just wouldn't. You would have had still all the other problems of mass immigration. But the housing problem is not an immigration problem, as can be seen on multiple charts that have been flying around the internet for at least a couple years now, showing the divergence between average home prices and and incomes. That's what I was looking for. Um, it's a long-standing problem in Canada, and it's only gotten worse. Now, has it been exacerbated since 2015? Yeah, but as I'm going to routinely say on this channel, uh, you have to look at what else broke just slightly before then and has had numerous ripple effects. That would be the entire euro dollar market, and the banking system for that matter is fundamentally operating, if you put it in the context of an engine. All right, the economy is a V12 with maybe 3 working cylinders. All right, can you get from point A to point B? Yeah. Is it a great experience? No. Are you getting everything you paid for? Not at all. But let me get into this. Like, again, the base layer problem is incomes. All right. And what happens to perceived assets when average incomes don't keep up and you have a boatload of debt. All right. The way to make money fast is to invest in assets using leverage, so that you go from, saying you've got $10,000 collateralized, you've got 10x leverage, so you know you're working with $100,000, and your leverage play, base layer of the asset doubles, so you've made a shit ton of money. More people come piling in. Asset inflates to all heck, and again, housing has been speculative, but there is also a supply problem. Is there a demand problem? Yes, but really, it's a supply problem. All right, they cannot build houses fast enough to meet demand, and it's not just because demand is crazy high. It's, if you look, supply or new supply coming online has diminished. Now this is where it gets interesting. Depending on whose chart you're looking at anywhere between say mid 60s to, like, you can get into early 2000s where they really screw with supply numbers, but just say in the 70s, since the 70s, new housing starts have gone down. All right, people are going to say, oh, it's a consequence of going off of the gold standard. Possibly. I mean, there's a lot of things that went on in that time, in that time, that gets blamed on the gold standard. Like, you have the euro dollar, and like just debt in general goes crazy wild, and you actually have to go off the gold standard because you have too much gold leaving and there's no way to catch up. I have a video on that if you want to watch, but I think it's something called like why the gold standard died or something like that. There is a reason, and this is very important to know. But anyways, what's going on is banks don't want to loan to build housing like they used to, and they don't want to loan to the individual to buy housing like they used to. In Canada, most of that has been offloaded into mortgage companies, which are high risk investments to say the least. Um, I believe they're regulated like banks. They're a bank like, um, they're bank like in general, and for regulatory purposes, it's like it's bank adjacent. So you could still consider it a bank, but we'll just say mortgage companies. Um, and the reason for banks is why they want that stuff off their balance sheet is it's too slow. Like, sure, mortgages are decent for your portfolio, but you don't want to be over leveraged on it, especially with the government coming in and screwing with the market. The government came in starting in like the 90s in the United States, and it's proliferated all over the world now, creating subprime. Prime being you are the bank's choice to lend to. Subprime is the bank doesn't want to lend to you, but the government says lend to them. All right. So that stuff almost always gets offloaded. Like it's reasons why, if you're a wealthy individual, a bank will lend to you no matter what, and at really really good rates. They may even lose on the rates. Like you can get into positions where they will negatively lend to you, the spread, where you know the overnight rate could be like 3%, and they will give a high net worth individual like a loan of 1%. So they're losing 2% on the deal, but there is a network effect created in doing so. So it does benefit them long run. But anyways, you get in this perspective from the bank of not wanting to lend people money for housing. Now, if you look in the context of building housing, it's because housing takes forever to build. Like, even if everything is running correctly, all right, a project can take 2 years to build. All right. So it's 2 years until there is an actual product for the bank to have collateral on, because the way loans work, is, especially in the context of housing, is whatever is being built is the collateral. The property and everything is the collateral for the bank. So again, banks are scared shitless of not having a collateralized loan. There are very few people who qualify for a non-collateralized loan. Anyways, so it takes, say, about 2 years for a collateral to be there, all right, for the bank. That's incredibly slow. And you look at, again, banks have more data on incomes and jobs than anybody else in the world. And if they're not loaning, all right, to people who, have jobs and incomes, it says they're not entirely sure that you could actually afford this. And it even goes down to like relatively well-paying jobs and that are very secure. They still don't like to lend out because it is a high risk. They have seen the trend of jobs and incomes in the last 30 years being horrendous and no way out of it. So the underlying problem, jobs and income. As always, when you're talking with the economy, problem isn't freaking rates. It's not government involvement or it's not too much involvement. It's not lack of involvement. Well, I mean, it gets a little complicated there. It's not specifically the debt, not specifically, but it is a jobs and income problem, and it's long standing. All right, we're like in the West, we're in like decade 3 of jobs and incomes continually being bad. In Japan, they're on like the 4th decade, which really sucks. But anyways, you look at it from, again, back to the bank perspective of, for housing, loaning it out to build houses, the construction side, all right? It's a slow business. Like 2 years, all right? Anything can happen in 2 years to the developer, the construction company, and the suppliers, the sub trades, everything. You can have massive problems, all right, in that scenario. Um, Near me, there's a subdivision that's still being built, and it's like on year 10. Um, Whole bunch of problems with, I mean, not just jobs and income, but like supply issues. And this is before the COVID supply chains completely are just wrecked of like getting anything in a timely manner. Um, so that's bad. One of the housing projects near me started well before COVID. Um, and like I'm not sure how the company finished it during COVID. Like it took probably a year and a half to get the brickwork done because they just couldn't get the brick. And you know, that's one of the things that's really easy to tell. Um, on a job site, you can see the amount of bricks. You can see the amount of bricks going up. You can see them piled, and if they're not piled, and you're like, well, you're halfway done. Oh, you're waiting on more bricks. It's that. So you've got like all that. Another big housing development near me. There was like 11 apartment buildings. It was like a massive building or massive development for the community. Like, the guy was connected with all the city councilors, uh, threw in all the DEI and climate BS that you would expect to get the project off the ground. It got slammed through the city council and the regional council. They were like, "Oh my god, this is amazing," um, and then funding fell through. The banks pulled out. They're like, "Oh no 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 no! You're not going to be able to properly finish financing to just start building, and then once once the project is complete, you're not going to reach minimum occupancy fast enough. Plus, we're looking at our balance sheets, and we don't want, I think it was I can't remember if it was just $1 billion or was a multi-billion-dollar deal for these 11 buildings, which is really ridiculous when you think about it. But um, just let's just work with $1 billion. They could not afford to have $1 billion on their balance sheet that was just a hole that they wouldn't be able to fill for at least, again, say 10 to 15 years. Plus they would have had to refi it in between there. It was going to be a nightmare for the banks. So instead, the banks pulled out. The other investors then, they got skittish. They pulled out. Everything collapsed, and the banks went into highly liquid assets. Because guess what's not liquid? A half-finished building. Like, plain and simple. Or if you even look at like a subdivision, all right? Think about how long it takes to finish a subdivision. Like, you could have a subdivision with 500 houses. That takes a while. Like, sure, you can technically build a house in like under 6 months, all right? Problem is, if you do that, you have to sell it real quick. So like the way subdivisions are sold is it takes so long because you're selling plots of land and then the developers coming in building the land. It's a really really scary business model when you really look into it, which we're not going to here. But like, you used to just be able to build the houses and people would come, but now people don't have the incomes to buy. All right. And you have to maintain a certain profit margin on buildings to to justify the existence of the project. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, if you look at construction companies, you know, depending on who you're working with and how greedy they are, they could be only making, like, say, like the company actually running the job site, all right? They could be only making 3% per job. And it could take 18 months to get payment after the job. Like, it is a ridiculously high risk problem, right? And if you look at, you know, people right now at the individual level, who here in Canada qualifies for, I know housing prices has come down, so let's say instead of it's $1 million home, it's a $750,000 home with maybe you're able to scrape by, just under 100,000. Maybe you even get $100,000 down payment. Like, who can then afford $650,000 mortgage at say everybody's probably going to be in that more subprime category, so anywhere between 5 and 11% interest rate is going to be your rate. Like, who can afford that? Like, you're looking at monthly payments on housing still being $2,000 to $4,000 on the average house, something like that. I'm just doing a rough estimate there. Don't take that as the holy grail. Like, it's just not feasible because it comes back to jobs and income, right? There's not enough high-paying jobs that were promised due to, technology coming around, and it's just not there. It's harder than ever to make a business case for a lot of businesses, and now you can do it. Now, part of the problem is, yes, in Canada you have this overregulation, blah 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 blah. That stuff is going to persist everywhere, and you do see that in the construction side too. But if you compare that to, say, New York City, where things are constantly going up, and if you know why, it's because money changes hands and everybody looks the other way, and that doesn't happen at the same rate in Canada. It's like, if you're looking, like, the biggest blessing and curse that Canada has is that it's right next door to the global hegemon, right? It's a blessing because if you've got decent trade with them, all right, and if you understand how markets work, you can attract quite a large percent, or, like, maybe you can get 10% out of the Americans and bring that over into Canada and sell it back to the Americans. It's a great idea. You just siphon a little bit. You have to be smart, which Canadian politicians are not. And you can see that divergence really start to happen just as the GFC is about to kick off. Like, you can start to see it in 06 of what. So it's not just a, hey, the Liberals are dipshit. It's all Canadian politicians are dipshits. But you also have the problem of the Eurodollar, of, like, why would you want to go into business in a country that is, got a lot of detriment? Let's just blame the Liberals for that, all right? That doesn't have dollars. Like, it's got Canadian dollars, but it doesn't have US dollars, which is what everybody needs. Like, everybody, especially banks, need US dollars of some variety, whether that's the digital dollars that are flying around, the debt dollars, or, like, US bonds, all right? Because they're dollars plus, as I continually say. Money plus. Why would you want to be in Canada when you can go to America? Okay? Or why would you want to be in Canada building real estate as a bank? Just think about it as a bank. When you've got all these negatives here, all of them, like you've got incomes everywhere, it's all screwed. It's all bad. All right? Everything across the board, regulations, um, like building regs, regulations on workers, all that uh, financing, all that stuff. It's all bad. It's all red flags. All right. Why would you want to, as a bank, invest to get a return in a project that's going to take a couple years until it's safe as collateral? When you could instead go into a market, say like say Singapore, where you can go in, the cost of building a high rise is much lower. They can do it faster. You don't have to worry about so much the incomes, because what's happening is you have high net worth individuals in that primarily reside in the West. They're taking their money and buying places elsewhere that have a higher I don't want to say standard of living, but they can get a higher standard of living because they are high net worth individuals. So like if you go to a lower cost of living, that's what I was looking for. Cost of living. Like again, Singapore. Like their currency is not as strong. So if you move from say Canada to Singapore, your dollars go farther. So that's just better sense. And again, it's mostly high net worth individuals, that have got places everywhere. But you're selling to them, and it's a safer prospect. Why would you invest here in Canada? All right, when the economy's slowing, like you can clearly see that because you're a bank and you have access to everybody's financial data. And while, yes, in the example, it's Singapore. Singapore is slowing too, but like a crash in Singapore, all right, isn't as devastating to just the state of the economy. Like you get a trade sideways for the most part with the population, or the population you're catering to, all right, the higher end Westerners and maybe the wealthier Singaporeans. Your your clientele is relatively safe. Like sure, the amount of people you're selling to is going to drop, obviously, but like it's not a big loss. Like if you look here now at like a new apartment development, all right, you got to hit relatively quickly 70% occupancy to just break even. It's somewhere around there. Like it's a relatively high number just to break even. Like you used to be able with apartments to make money at 50% occupancy. You can no longer do that. Again, most of it is because debt financing. The amount of money you have to pay monthly to make a profit, or the money you have to be bringing in to make a profit, is kind of ridiculous. And again, it's debt-based monetary system. It's how it operates. The debt number has to go up, and if it's not, you're in a massive amount of problems. So, like, the housing market is screwed, not just because, oh, hey, we brought in a whole bunch of immigrants. Like, if the system was, all else was functioning fairly well, you would have massive amounts of housing just going up, and prices would stay relatively the same. Now, obviously costs are going to fluctuate on what, especially when it comes to um, the price you need to bring in monthly, the rent payment on an apartment, due to interest rates and other such stuff. Like, yes, obviously interest rates are a contributing factor, but interest rates move not based on uh you know anything other than really jobs and incomes. Like, if the economy starts slowing down, they cut rates in the hopes of stimulating the economy. Doesn't really work. Then when they start to see what is considered reflation, they start jacking up rates in a way to prevent inflation getting out of control, which also doesn't really work. The details for that is like its own video that I don't think I can do myself. I've attempted in the past. It's just I'm not very good at explaining why interest rates don't fucking matter to the system whatsoever. I mean, they do, but not really. Like, they matter to banks and influence bank decisions, but like it's because the system is so heavily reliant on short-term debt financing that it screws everything else up. Like, if you didn't have the need for repo to just have cash flow for banks, the system would work and you'd have investments in places that would generate more jobs and higher incomes. But because you do have that repo problem, it's kind of very, very hard. Now, if you could somehow deflate the economy or disinflate it, which you really can't. You have governments who are in a position where they are forced to do something stupid in the hopes that, hey, look, we did something, we're trying, and they don't lose power. But that only works a little bit. Anyways, housing market, way more complicated than just immigrants is the problem. Are they a contributing factor? Absolutely. But I don't know, I mentioned like 3 other ones. One of them is the banks. It's just, you have an economy that is continually slowing down. It's very hard to float, again, a massive building project of, say, a new subdivision of at least 500 homes for, like, in my area, it's like 5 to 10 years until a subdivision is like 100% donesy and all the houses are sold. Like, it's incredibly hard to float that, even though each year you're getting more and more income because more and more houses are actually being sold. So like there's more money coming in, but like it's just so hard to justify it to a bank, when instead you can say, hey, you need to make in a year off of $1 billion investment, you need to triple your money. Where are you going to go do that? You're going to go to the casino that is known as equity markets. And hell, you just give the $1 billion loan to a hedge fund who is then going to come back to you and leverage up, 50x and just make it back in like a weekend. Something stupid like that. Like that happens. And this is why all the jokers around saying, this is the problem with the housing. It's interest rates. It's the cheap money. It drives up prices. It's like, yeah, kind of, sort of. But it's the entire banking system, the way it's set up, where they're like, it's the immigrants. It's the liberals. And it's like, everybody has a contributing factor, but the root problem comes back to the freaking banks. So, that's the video for today. tomorrow I'm thinking about looking at what's going on with the Chinese and the American and the trade war, and why I do not believe the Americans are going to blink first. Like, you know what? I'm not even going to preview it. Like, the Chinese will absolutely blink first. They need to. Till then, have a good day. Anything else? Nope. Just have a good day. See you in the next one.